We have this incredibly bloated financial sector. It's a phony crisis. They don't have to be cuts. We know how to get out of a Great Depression. You spend money. If we take a look at the typical worker, they're not doing fine.
Hi, I'm Dean Baker, your host for Mostly Economics. Today we have with us Ed Zitron, who's the CEO of EZPR and probably the best known critic of AI, the biggest, I don't know if advocate's the right word, but the biggest warner, let's just say, of a bubble in the market. So we're going to talk about AI, the bubble, and where it's going to go. So thanks for joining us, Ed.
Thanks to you for having me.
So let me start. We'll get right to it. I haven't looked today, but last I looked, the market cap of Nvidia was around $6 trillion. So should I buy?
That's the thing. We're in this kind of another era of irrational exuberance because maybe, but today, as we speak, don't know when this will go out, it's Nvidia's earnings and the tech Super Bowl, and a bunch of people who don't really care about tech, including the people who cover Nvidia, will speak about Nvidia and say, wow, what an amazing company. They're probably going to beat and raise. They're probably going to beat analyst estimates. They'll raise again. And the most worrying thing is that every time this happens, the worse it gets. Because I have done the research. I've spent hours and hours and hours doing this. There is no way in hell that we have installed even half of the GPUs sold in 2025, and nor do I think we will for several years. It's not anything to do with demand. It's the fact that data centers take 2 to 4 years to build, even smaller ones. So Nvidia is in this irrationality sphere where it kind of always gets bid up. It always has to beat and raise, because if it doesn't, well, the whole market relies on it. So right now, they're at 220 something, which is really weird because there's so many signs that something is wrong, but the markets are now fundamentally disconnected from fundamentals. And there's obviously something strange going on there. So it's really hard to say when to stop buying Nvidia. I don't give stock advice, but it's like, it's this weird situation where nothing about the company really makes sense when you think about it on very practical terms.
Well, let me go on a couple things here. First off, I'm totally sympathetic to the saying you can't say when to stop. And I'm old enough, I think I a few years on you, but to remember the tech bubble. And, I was talking about it and going, this looks really bad. This looks really bad. And, for my part, not that I had any great sum, but I had a 401k. I still have a 401k. And I took it out in March of 98 because I go, this is nuts. This is nuts. Well, It kept going up for 2 years. I mean, I wish I could have said I took it out in March of 2000, but, at the end of the day, it was the right call, but it was 2 years too early.
At least you didn't take out in March 2002.
Yeah, no, exactly. So at the end of the day, I end up being very happy. Although, yes, you could always do better, Yeah. But anyhow, so I'm totally, I don't, I didn't expect you were going to give me a date when the video was going to turn, So yes, but if I can ask you to explain a little bit, because I kind of understand what you're saying, but I think a lot of people we might have watching this, when you're saying that they haven't installed what they've sold. So if you could clarify,
okay,
what exactly is going on there.
Happy to. So a data center, an AI data center, if you hear someone say we're building an AI data center that's a gigawatt in capacity, that has never happened. They have been started. None of them have ever been finished. The closest we've got is Stargate Abilene, which is this OpenAI Oracle mess out in Texas. 2 buildings out of 8. It's been 2 years. AI data centers take forever. They take 18 to 24 months. NVIDIA's Blackwell GPUs really started shipping at the beginning of 2025 because there was a heat-related issue that delayed them. So you got the situation where Jensen Huang claims 3 million Blackwell NVIDIA GPUs shipped. Now, that is about 4 gigawatts of capacity. Just stick with me. There is no way in hell that much capacity has come online. In fact, no one has a good handle on how much capacity has come online. Now, the reason I'm so sure of this is I spent hours and hours and hours finding things that had broken ground and then trying to find any proof they'd opened. I found 4 of them that had opened, and they were teeny tiny ones. They were like 4 to 36 megawatts. So almost every data center you've ever heard of is not finished. They're being built, but they're not being finished because construction's difficult. Putting aside the fact that the power isn't available, there's a shortage of electrical grade steel, shortage of transformers, shortage of talent, shortage of materials that are now more expensive because of tariffs. Putting all that aside as well, it's just very tough to build these things. The fact they're building them in Texas with all the weather problems is also a problem. So, in very practical terms, Nvidia is clearly selling GPUs years in advance, but they're not disclosing anything about it. They're trying to avoid talking about the fact that I think, this is just an assumption of mine, that they're doing something called bill and hold, which you might remember from the dot-com bubble, where they say, great, they sell $50,000 GPUs. We're going to sell a few billion of those. Oh, you don't have the data center ready? No problem, mate. We'll put them in a warehouse for you. You'll have to sign this NDA so that no one knows that that's happening, but that's what you need to do. Because of the irrational exuberance, people are also desperate to get ahead. They're desperate to put as many of these GPUs in their own stock, even if they're years ahead of them. There are economic problems with that as well, which is, okay, so in 2 years, you're going to have a 2-year-old chip, and these chips are replaced on a yearly cycle. Vera Rubin is coming this year sometime. That isn't great. So we're in this perpetual cycle of eventually standing up years-old chips, and there are some Blackwell chips going online. There are some, but not that many. Maybe a couple 100,000, maybe 1 million max, but that still means the vast majority of them are sitting in warehouses. Nvidia has not disclosed this, and Nvidia beats and raises every time. And if they're doing this by pre-selling GPUs, you've got two worrisome things. One, will the companies buying them still be around by the time they need to pay for them or by the time that they need to pick them up? Two, can they cancel them? Because that's exactly what happened with Cisco, Lucent, Nortel, all sorts of equipment manufacturers during the dot-com bubble. Celex were canceling, everyone was canceling because why would they need this? And people were intentionally buying more than they needed, knowing that they could cancel those orders. There's something up here.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And, in terms of the buyers, now, as I understand, they also have a lot of circular finance that very often NVIDIA is, basically paying for their own product. They're lending the money to the companies that are buying up their product.
Oh, it's even dumber than that. What they do, so CoreWeave's a great example. It's called a NeoCloud. A NeoCloud is a fancy way of saying we're a company that buys GPUs and puts them in data centers. Sometimes we build them, sometimes we lease them. CoreWeave, they were invested in by Nvidia. Nvidia is one of their largest customers. Nvidia propped up their IPO. Nvidia has invested at least $2 billion in post-IPO equity. They've done this with Lambda, Iron. Google has done this with TeraWulf and Cypher. I mean, this should be illegal, just to be clear. Like, this 100% should be illegal. There's we need regulation on this. But yes, Nvidia has spent they invested $30 billion in OpenAI. Nvidia is keeping itself alive by feeding the money in there. And I wish we had better members of the media to say, hey, a healthy industry doesn't need this. Instead, we have some of the most brainless, corrupt, craven sell-side and buy-side analysts who are just going, oh, this is the biggest, it's a super cycle. It's a super cycle. Look at all the stuff that's being sold. Not actually bothering to look at the other end and see if the revenues are there, which they are most decidedly not, outside of OpenAI and Anthropic, who I think are doing dodgy accounting.
Well, it sounds a lot like going back to the days of the dot-com bubble and also the housing bubble. I mean, you had, again, it was, both of them. I was going, this is crazy. The housing bubble, I was more going, it's crazy, because it was just, at least to me, very, very visible. I mean, it's, and people are just saying, ungodly, when I'm saying people, I mean like reporters at major news outlets were just saying ungodly, stupid things. I don't know how many times I saw people say, well, housing's not like a .com stock because you could always live in your house. And you go, yeah, but how many people could afford to live in a house that they paid $400,000 for that's now worth $200,000? I mean, like, what the hell does that mean?
Yeah, there's the equivalent of that. It's not like for like, but there are many similarities. The equivalent with that is right now there are data center capacity constraints because, as I said, they're not being built. People are conflating that and saying, wow, it's hard to get a GPU right now to rent for my AI services. They're conflating that with the idea that there's unlimited demand. That they're saying because it's hard and expensive to get compute right now, that means that there's unlimited demand versus the fact that we just have a constraint problem. The other thing is these data centers, they're building them, and they're saying, well, we have guaranteed tenants. We have tenants who have agreed to take this up whenever it gets built. Two problems with that. Number one, most of these contracts have an out. if you miss a milestone, if you don't make it by this date, we no longer have to take this. Microsoft has one of these with Nebius, a big neo cloud. I think it's if they don't hit certain production milestones, Microsoft can walk away. The other thing is as well, great. Wow, you built this house for these people that said they'll buy it. Sorry, messed that one up. You built this data center for an AI startup. Brilliant. Cool. They're going to use it. Quick question. What happens if they run out of money? What happens if they can't pay you? What happens if nothing happens? What happens if, because Oracle right now, for example, is building 7.1 gigawatts of data center capacity for OpenAI, a company that cannot afford to pay them. And Oracle also can't afford to build the data centers. But everyone's saying, wow, holy crap. Oracle's going to get $300 billion over 5 years. Wow. Wowza. That's like more than their annual revenue every year. Wow, this is going to be crazy. One little problem. OpenAI doesn't have the money. Other problem, Oracle doesn't have the money to build the data center, so they have to get a bunch of debt. And I talk to economists, I talk to journalists, I talk to academics, and they all say, well, Oracle will get paid. I'm like, how? OpenAI loses billions of dollars a year. Well, they'll raise more money. Is your only answer, and it literally is, well, they'll just raise money from someone. It's rich kid logic. It's straight up rich kid logic. It's just, well, daddy's credit card's never been declined before. And on the more macro scale data center thing, when you actually look at the data centers and you look at how many are being built, there's apparently like over 100 gigawatts of capacity that's been announced, only 15 gigawatts actually under construction. That accounts for, I think it's like $200 billion of annual AI revenue, AI compute revenue. Yeah, when you remove Anthropic and OpenAI, there's maybe $1 billion of AI compute revenue max. The customer base doesn't exist, but when you try and talk to people about this, when you try and just have a genuinely rational conversation, they get so angry. They get very defensive. They get very much like, well, what do you mean? Nvidia's selling all this stuff. Corning just signed a deal with Nvidia. Like, how do you mean? Oh, Marvel, you've got Micron. They're all doing crazy. AMD, they're all going crazy. The parabolic sales. What do you mean there's no market for this? And the answer is, because the AI companies need to rent the GPUs, and the AI companies are all unprofitable. How do they pay for them? And no one really has a cogent answer for this other than nuh-uh.
Let me ask you a little bit about that end product here, because this is, I mentioned before we came on about China, and you're way more into this than I am, but I read some of the press, and it looks to me like China's AI, I'm talking end product here, is way cheaper, like a fifth, a tenth the price of US AI. And again, just going on what I've seen in some articles in the press, it sounds like, China's just eating our lunch when, you look at the rest of the world, and apparently even to some extent in Silicon Valley, which, I mean, to me, this seems important because at the end of the day, you need someone to buy the stuff. And if the Chinese AI is a fifth, a tenth the price, who's going to buy the stuff that, our guys are selling? Am I missing something here? Or is that,
I mean, the thing you're missing is that the end product isn't that impressive. Because fun game to play for anyone here. Go and try and find, first of all, revenues for AI. Very difficult. You get annualized revenues, which is a classic .com bubble scam where you do month times 12. Yeah. But another thing to try is try and find productivity benefits of AI. In fact, just try and find what someone's doing with them. You'll get a bunch of people saying, wow, I'm doing all my coding with this. Then go and look at the 10Q, 10K, see if you can find any kind of economic benefit. You won't be able to. And they'll say, well, we've been automating this thing. Goldman Sachs signed a deal with Anthropic for Claude. And you're like, great, what does that mean? No one will tell you. The problem is that no one has really worked out yet what this thing can do. Everyone's got very excited about it. No one's really sat down and be like, wow, okay, what is the actual productivity and economic benefit of this? And there really isn't one. You have engineers claiming they're writing no code anymore. What does that mean? Like, I don't know if I agree with that being unilateral, but take that at its face. Okay, what does that mean? Because you're not replacing the engineers because you can't trust this stuff, and it's not getting better. It's not improving to the point when you can leave it. It's never going to. Okay, great. So getting back to the China side, The reason that everyone's a bit nervous is because no one can really find the productivity benefits in a tangible sense. The Chinese models being cheaper is scary. Kimi K2, I think, is one of the models from over there. Wow, yeah, that model's pretty good, and it can do some other things. It's not as good. You can run it on device. That's competitive. But again, what does this result in economically, revenue, any kind of like, no one can really tell you. The one thing you can do, however, is go and look at the Chinese companies that actually discuss their AI revenues. Minimax losing over $200 million a quarter. ZPU, I think, doing the same thing. Alibaba doesn't seem to be gaining anything off of AI other than very large capex charges. When you actually go and look at the numbers are bad. The thing that everyone in America is scared of with China, they're going to say, oh, well, they'll have access to powerful AI. They'll have access to powerful Nvidia GPUs. They already got them. They already smuggled them over. There is a short seller report, CEPR. They say that they think that Nvidia has been selling directly to China using intermediaries. China already has access to all of this. China is already there. What's happened? I don't know. I really don't. There are people I get emails from every day who are like, well, I think you're underselling the fact that people are doing AI coding now. Oh, I was able to pull together a report and the report was accurate. And I'm always like, okay, really? Is that it though? Everyone's talking about this all the time. The best you can say is I got a maybe accurate report and I did some coding for an indeterminate economic output. It is not clear what this. We're not getting a flood of good new software. We're getting a lot of slop, but we're not getting. It's not like any of these companies are better. It's not like you can point to any of these AI-pilled companies and say, "Wow, Spotify is so much better. Wow, Intuit, their AI stuff's making it better." In fact, across the board, they're pretty bad. So
man, you're way more negative on this stuff than I am. I thought I was negative. In my experience, I've had very little. I'm just direct experience. I've a few times had it. I remember my biggest success was I had to write a reference section for me. So I was writing a paper and I had to do, reference sections, pain in the ass, and I'm a bad typer, so I make a lot of mistakes. So
formatting?
Excuse me?
Like formatting the reference section.
Well, no, and finding the sources. So I said, there's a particular economist and, find the papers he did on a particular topic and put in a reference section. And it did that for me. And I had to go through there because there were a few that I wouldn't use and, whatever. But, it probably saved me 2 hours, 3 hours of work, and probably did a better job because I make mistakes. So, anyhow, I'm not going to say that this changes the world, but I was happy for it.
But that's actually a really good point. So if what you were describing was an industry that was selling itself as a modest software play, I wouldn't argue with you. If they were saying this is a 30 billion TAM market using specialist compute capacity, if every 3 months we didn't have to do a Super Bowl party for Nvidia's earnings, if this was just, it's kind of a bit rough, but I was able to do my references with it. I assume you checked them all also just in case of hallucinations. Then I'd be like, fine. What you were describing is a better Google search or a more easy to use Google search or what have you. Google search has been a mess since 2019, I think. That was when things went wrong there. But nevertheless, if you were describing a modest software play and people were talking about this in a normal sense, I'd be like, yeah, sure. I find that inoffensive. That's not what's happening, though. People would hear that. People would use that story that you just told, which is perfectly reasonable. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, the fact you checked it is good. Formatting's annoying. This is the kind of thing that computers are meant to fix.
Yeah.
But
and I'm sure I could have found software that would do that too. Pre-AI. I don't know at what
nevertheless,
point.
Maybe you couldn't have. Maybe this is something LLMs are good at, formatting a page. That's fine. I find that inoffensive. The thing is, people would take that example and they would extrapolate from there and say, well, next time in like a year or two, you'll just do that and it'll write the whole paper and it will check the references and everything will be perfect. And then it will publish for you and it'll do it. All of these insane tendrils out from a relatively pedestrian feature, like a useful one, but a pedestrian feature. I also, by the way, I find the research of these things pretty damn poor. I think the only thing with LLMs that really impresses me, and impresses is kind of a little bit of an overstatement, is that they are better ingesting what I'm searching for than regular Google search, that they can understand if I say, find me this, 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 and this, it's the natural language processing is better. Again, though, that's not how this is being sold. This is being sold as the change of everything. Everything will be different now. Like, the very nature of society will change. You have people, ostensibly smart people, who are talking about this like we are mere years from artificial general intelligence, an entirely fictional concept of a conscious compute.
Yeah, no, I see that, and I'm sympathetic to that. And also, again, I'm struck because I have all these, I don't know if argument's the right word, but there's all these people saying, what are we going to do with all the people being laid off because of AI?
What
And
people?
I'm saying, I'm not convinced we're going to see mass layoffs from AI. I mean, I've done a lot of work in labor economics. We should be worried about people losing their jobs generally. Yeah. But, I really doubt we're going to have to worry about mass layoffs with AI. But, if we want to worry about people losing their jobs, that's a good thing to worry about. But I don't think.
The job loss story is really disgraceful as well, because Oxford Economics, if they had a soul, they would be going out there and correcting the record of how often their studies are misquoted. I read a thing in Axios last year that said an Oxford Economics paper proved that AI job loss was happening. When you go and look in the paper, there is a single line where they say, we saw some evidence of some job loss related to AI, and provided no data as to what that was. I think that modern economics has failed. I think economic research has failed. I think many economists have failed. Justin Wolfers, who I genuinely admire otherwise, has become fully AI pilled. He is saying, he is talking about how, we're going to have to get ready. This is the next industrial revolution. It's like, my man, this is still a chatbot. Might have fancy chatbot tendrils, but it's still a chatbot.
I'll speak up for my profession, because I do try and, not that I read everything on AI that economists produce, but, there's a range, people at least I consider more serious macroeconomists. There's a range of estimates of its impact on productivity. And at the low end, you have people like Darren Asaniglu, who's around 0.1% a year, which is not trivial. I mean, because if you take that over a decade or something, it adds to something, but it's not life-changing. At the high end, I've seen them, again, among the people I consider serious, it's about 0.5 percentage point a year, which is a big deal. But again, it's not life-changing. So if you go back to the 90s tech boom, the uptick in productivity growth was about 1 percentage point a year.
Yeah.
So if we get 0.5 percentage point, to my mind, that's a great story. I mean, in principle, we're getting wealthier. People get higher wages, shorter work time, all sorts of good things. But it's not, it's less than what we had in the late 90s. And, going back to ancient history now, it's much less than what we had in the long post-war boom from, 45 to 73. So,
yeah,
those strike me as plausible numbers. I mean, that's, not a huge range. And, taking the high end, again, people I'm considering serious, I'm sure I could find people of much higher numbers.
Yeah.
But, I don't think if someone says it's 0.5 percentage point a year, it ends up being 0.2 percentage point a year. I don't know if I'd go to town on them. Now, if in fact, as you're saying, and I'd agree that we have a serious bubble, I think that's, missing that is going to be a really big deal. Because, again, I'm old enough to have been through the history, and it's easy enough to recover it. I mean, we have the predictions, in both, 2001 when the tech bubble burst, and then in 2008, 9, the economy collapsed. I mean, we saw a radically different story in terms of, growth and, more importantly, employment, jobs, than what was projected before it burst. And, basically no one was projecting it burst. And that was a serious failing.
Let me posit a really simple thing. What if there's a 0% effect of it? What if there's no productivity benefits? Like, that's what I'm kind of getting at. What if there's none? Because,
again, that would be the bubble story. I mean, so if we go, let's say that, Asaniglu is too optimistic at 0.1%. I'd have to go back to see what his exact number was, but let's say he's saying 0.1 percentage point. Hopefully I'm not maligning him, exaggerating. But, so let's say it ends up being 0 rather than 10. That really doesn't matter much. But what will matter is if everyone's banking on Nvidia's stock, Nvidia's earnings actually justifying a $6 trillion cap, and, all the others, the story better than I do. That's going to be a very bad story, because we're going to see, serious collapse in asset values. And that's driving both parts are driving the economy. As you say, the effort to build data centers, even if they just sit idle, you're creating a huge amount of demand in the economy, and it's very visible. I mean, you can see it in, macroeconomics. I could see it in the data. It's very
Yeah.
clear. That's a sector driving growth. And then also, people spend based on their stock wealth. So everyone's running around, buying a second home, a new car, whatever, because they just made 50,000 in the stock market and they're Nvidia stock. Now, if their Nvidia stock loses 90% of its value, they're going to stop buying those cars.
Wait, are you suggesting that people are buying Nvidia stock previously and selling it and then feeding that money back into the economy?
They're not necessarily selling it. They might just buy based on the fact that they're sitting there saying, "Look, I spent 100,000 on my Nvidia stock, and now it's what it go up like 20-fold." So
well, here's kind of the thing I'm getting at. So there are two things we're talking about here. I think that there is a very worrying trend of retail piling into Nvidia and related stocks. I actually think retail trading needs to be pared back heavily. I don't think regular people should have access to options. I think it's inherently
good luck
dangerous.
with that one.
Well, no, good luck.
No,
I
I'm
agree.
right to that. I'm just saying
the toothpaste is
way.
Yeah, the toothpaste's out of the tube at this point, but that's a very bad thing. That is one thing where I think you've got 401ks, pensions. Well, pensions are also in data centers through private credit, which is another problem. But then there's the other one, which is the actual AI LLM productivity thing. I don't think people realize how little actual productivity changes are happening as a result of this. We are not seeing really new companies being built by small teams. That was the big sales. Like, oh, we're going to have people who run their own companies, just one person in AI. Not really happening. Maybe in very small scale, but not really happening. People are saying, well, they're going to be able to lay people off and replace them with AI. Again, not really happening. Hasn't happened anywhere. They're claiming AI. They're doing AI washing, which is when they say, oh, it's AI, when they're actually just trying to make the net income look a little bit better. And then there is this thing where they say, well, we'll enhance the team. Again, not really any evidence that's happening either. And I could keep going down this list, but the actual productivity benefits are really not there. And I mean that in a very defined sense. The one productivity thing we're seeing is that there's data center construction is overtaking commercial real estate at this point. So very bad, by the way. I think people really need to realize there's going to be a construction bubble that bursts as well, and that will have a massive, horrible blue-collar effect, specialized and not unspecialized talent as well. It's going to be really horrible there. But then there's the far simpler one, which is when this era ends, when AI bursts and we have we've run away from this, maybe there's dregs of these companies left, big tech doesn't have another idea. That's why they did this. They don't have any other hypergrowth ideas. They don't have a new iPhone. They don't have a new cloud computing. They don't really have anything else. They wanted to replace coders or enhance coders to do more, to propagate software, what have you. But they haven't really got anything else. This is why, by the way, they're really desperate to try and sell this SaaSpocalypse story. Have you heard about this one?
No.
SaaS, software as a service. So they're trying to claim, if you watch CNBC, if you want to punish yourself, watch CNBC. There is this thing, the SaaSpocalypse, that's saying, okay, AI is going to replace software. And this is the dumbest idea in the world. What they're saying is, okay, because you can write code with AI, because whether or not it's functional is kind of up for question. Because you can build software with AI, you can replace Salesforce, Intuit, CrowdStrike, whatever software you pay for, with your own software that you build. I've seen very, very smart people otherwise say this, and I need to be clear, this is an insane idea. It's like building a big Lego set and saying, wow, I could build a house. I don't need to rent anymore. I'll just go outside and build a house. It's that simple. Software as it's sold is not just sold as the software itself. It's not just the IP, it's the data, it's the structure, it's the support, it's the keeping it bug-free, and it's the ability to accommodate more staff as you grow. There are massive infrastructural sides of software. But anyway, this is the only thing they have to sell, and they've let this propagate because the market was ready to accept this. The market was saying, well, software stocks haven't been growing and revenues have been slowing in software. It must be AI. Now, the reason I've jumped over to this is it gets back to the idea of no more hypergrowth, that is, because The software industry has a dark secret that they want to hide. We are at the end of hypergrowth. We are not Google, Microsoft, Meta is Amazon. They don't have another iPhone. They don't have another cloud computing. It's not quantum either. They don't have a next big thing. Adobe, terrible company, software company. They don't have a next big thing. None of them have a next big thing. And their growth has been slowing. 2018 was really the watershed moment where things started to slow down. People don't realize that anytime you read the AI software story, you are reading someone trying to hide that software is dying. That the software industry, well, dying is probably the wrong word. Software is no longer this perpetual growth machine. AI is not changing that. AI is not making it worse either. They all thought that adding AI would actually fix the problem. No, it's kind of punted it a little bit. It's led to stocks getting cut down. I mean, every time Anthropic claims they've launched a plugin, someone's stock dumps. So this is all a very messy way to say that AI bubble, apocalypse, all of that is a symptom of a greater problem, which is tech is slowing down. Tech has been slowing down for a while. Why else would we be talking about goddamn semiconductors so much? Why are we talking about? But what do you like? Oh, we're gonna. Why are you pretending you care about high bandwidth RAM? You don't know. You know what that meant 2 years ago. Stop talking about it now. You know, it's kind of like all the people who suddenly became Strait of Hormuz experts. Suddenly everyone's a semiconductors expert. Everyone's trying to get away from thinking about the very dark, very sad thing, which is the markets are dependent on software. They need software to keep growing. It's not. And it's not coming back. Like we are in a post-growth software economy. They'll keep growing here and there. It's not over yet, but it's coming. It's coming fast. It's almost the inverse of the dot-com bubble, where people
Let me bring you to something that it was actually the first time I heard you on the radio talk about this.
Please.
Facebook and Meta. And I heard you a few years back, and you were totally trashing Facebook about how it's going to go out of business. I forget your timeline, but that was maybe a couple of years after they started Meta, and I guess they've basically written that off. Which
the metaverse.
Yeah, which it's if it weren't for all the AI stuff, it'd probably be getting a lot more attention. I mean, would they spend like $70 billion? That's a lot of money. I know it's.
Where did it go? Where did it go? Where'd all the money go? People are really cavalier about the fact that Meta lost $70 billion. Like that, in a functional SEC, we'd have a fundamental investigation of this. That's a lot of money to just go nowhere. And I don't think it was in the pervert glasses, the Ray-Bans. I don't think that's where it went. But Meta is interesting because I think they could die in the next decade. Like, their advertising business is falling apart. The move to the metaverse was exactly what I'm talking about. They know that their ad platform cannot grow forever they continue to screw over their customers and make the product worse. They know they're in post growth, so they had to come up with something. And then they had the single worst idea I've ever heard. I mean, the metaverse was one of the worst ideas, but it was the first time, again, sell side, buy side, journalists immediately were like, oh, the metaverse, we're all going to live in the metaverse. We're going to do this. What are you talking about? You sound like you got hit in the head. You sound like you have a gas leak. What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean we're going to all go to work with a VR headset? Are you insane? Are you a crazy person? What happened to you? Did you... please check your...
No, that's pretty much my reaction. I wasn't writing about it, but I was just, more casually. I was going like, who the hell is going to want this?
Well, I mean, Microsoft bought Activision Blizzard in that era, and they claimed it was a metaverse thing. And it was just like, what? That was the first sign that something was up. We as a society have lost our grip on fundamentals. We have lost our grip, and people say, oh, the market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent, blah, 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 blah. That statement is a way of endorsing bad behavior. That is a way that people get away from thinking about and talking about bad things and bad behavior. It's a lazy, cowardly thing to say because it allows you to think, well, it's okay the world is full of scammers and grifters and lies and misleading statements. It's good, actually. It's because the markets are bad, but the markets will eventually turn good one day. And it frustrates me because I'm relatively new to all this. In the last few years, I've really got into the deeper economic side. And the more you look, the more obvious it becomes. There's a great book called Financial Shenanigans. Is it Shillett? I think Fantastic, but you should look it up. It is straight up a long bullet point list of all the different ways that companies manipulate their shareholders and the dodgy things that are legal, but their accountancy tricks, financial shenanigans.
Yeah.
And I read it and I went, okay, Nvidia, Oracle, Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, like throughout, you could just, every major tech company was doing all of them. We're in a decaying market. We're in a market that is pumped up by outright scammers. And those scammers are the chief financial officers of major companies. Microsoft claimed that they, in each of the last 2 quarters, brought 1 gigawatt of data center capacity online. I could not find any data center that they broke ground on since 2023 that's actually finished. There's something very wrong and something very sick about our markets, and it's worse than what happened with the housing market, because the housing market at least created housing. Data centers have no other use, unless we're going to have laser tag everywhere, unless we're going to turn them all into Walmarts. I don't think that's going to happen. But GPUs, the classic post.com bubble comparison, people says, well, the dark fiber could get turned on. Here's the problem with this. 1, dark fiber, useful. It was dark, you light it up. It was still useful for getting the internet places. The interchange stuff was put in. It was expensive up front, but it didn't cost a ton of money to stand up and make useful. With data centers, if this construction is not finished, it will be just as expensive, if not more, to finish it. Those GPUs, the Nvidia GPUs, those aren't going to be cheaper in the future to run. There is no way the costs come down. Nobody has an answer there. People will say specialized silicon, like ASICs, they call them. It's just a chip specialized for one thing. Yeah, not happening. Just hasn't happened. Broadcom's been trying for years for Google. Now they're trying for OpenAI. Not happening. Like a Blackwell GPU is going to be expensive to the same level in 2030 as it is today. There's no economic shift that's going to happen that's going to make any of this cheaper in the way the dot-com bubble did. And in the dot-com bubble, again, you could go out and buy a server, some microsystems, what have you, server from someone, a dead startup and a bunch of Aeron chairs, and you could start up your own thing. You can't do that with an Nvidia GPU. You need rack space in a data center with power. You need somebody that can actually set it up. You need someone who can monitor it, because especially the latest generation ones require specialized bespoke cooling. And the more you have of them, the more of that specialized cooling and specialized talent you need to actually use it. Michael Burry, who's famous for his housing bubble stuff, has gone completely tits up on this. He is full AI bull now. He's pro Anthropic, pro all of them. And I think what it is that people are very good at numbers and statements. They can go, okay, people aren't paying their credit cards. That's bad. People aren't paying their mortgages. That's bad. Michael Burry example. Wow. These big blocks of mortgages, these big, bulky financial instruments full of crap mortgages that look good when you look from a far away, but when you look in, the mortgages are bad. That's bad. I should short the housing market because most mortgages are going to go bad. Something about AI does something to the trader and economist brain. They think, this isn't a bubble because AI could ... and then they say a bunch of insane stuff, just a bunch of crazy things. They'll be like, yeah, and all software will be automated, and every job will be automated. Everything will just be controlling AI agents, of course. And it's just something about the concept of AI, which is really a marketing term. AI is really just marketing. It doesn't really mean anything in the end. Something about that and extrapolating from the point of what automation theoretically could do drives people insane and makes people make these assumptions and jumps and leaps of logic, insane leaps of logic, by the way, that say, okay, well, from this point, we are going to have the unlimited automation that will change everything in every industry infinitely. It's almost like, because there's a possibility, maybe, even if there's no real evidence, that something might happen in 3 years, we could ignore everything bad now. Every worrying economic thing, like OpenAI burning 20, 30, $40 billion a year, Anthropic doing the same thing. We could ignore that. We could ignore the fact that most data center debt deals will go unpaid because they're project financing, which requires revenue, which won't be there, that every AI startup is unprofitable. People will ignore all of that. Really smart people that should know better. Many of them will ignore all of that because Dario Amodei or Demis Hassabis or Sam Altman or Jensen Huang or one of these other goofballs says, well, it will actually change everything in the future at some point. It's so strange. I don't even think the dot-com bubble compares. I mean, there are obviously parallels, but I don't think it compares because even when you go back to the dot-com bubble era, I was younger back then. I'm only 40. When you go back and read the journalism of the time, there was a ton of people saying crazy stuff, but not as many. And there were a fair amount of people going, hey, wait, these businesses are losing so much money and they're making $1 million a quarter. That's bad. Excite just bought Blue Mountain gift cards for like $1 billion. That's an insane deal. Why would they do that? People were still saying that, and they were saying it years before it burst. I've genuinely been attacked in the media and on social media for saying the things I'm saying. Like, there is an actual cult-like atmosphere from journalists, by the way, not just like regular freaks on Twitter. I mean, actual journos who are like, how dare you, like, this person, he's got some agenda. No, I don't have an agenda other than the fact that I think that people are being misled.
Yeah. Well, it's quite a story. I guess we'll see whether it ends up being worse than the dot-com bubble. I mean, the one thing
that's what I fear.
You know, I keep saying I hope it happens soon. You know, sooner, that collapse sooner, and people going, "Oh, you want bad things?" I go, "No, it's just going to be worse." I mean, if it's not real, if it turns out to be real, wonderful. But I don't see any story there, and I'd rather see it collapse tomorrow than, you know, go on for another 6 months, year, 2 years. So
yeah, that's exactly how I feel. I want this to end sooner rather than later because it's going to suck. But the longer it takes, the worse it's going to get.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to have you back here 6 months, a year down the road, and either it'll be a lot worse or maybe we'll be picking up the pieces. So
I really look forward to it.
Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
If you like what you just saw, please help us out by liking us and subscribing. Thank you.